Thank you very much, Devanshi, and welcome you all for this wonderful and power-packed session, as I call it. And I must thank all eminent leaders to agree to spare your time. And before I move on to, I request Nishith Bhai, our founder, to welcome them.
I think this is one of the finest sessions we are having, and welcome all our guests, revered guests. I think you all are leaders in your own right, and it's really a privilege for us to have you. And you can see that from the presence of the people. I believe in terms of registration, we have very large number of people. Everybody's interested. I think this is something new way of thinking. So far, we have focused and talked about Make in India. I think it is time has come when we really need to leverage our innovative skills. And we have so much talent, so much of the powerhouse here that why we cannot innovate. I think that is what is the biggest strength than even make in India. You can make anywhere in the world, but you can innovate in India. I think the value creation and the value capturing that would happen would be really beneficial to India as well as to the world at large. I think today is a time when we can do a lot in terms of, thinking, ideating, creating solutions. Innovation is nothing else but finding a solution to the problems through an innovative, what you call, or through an unprecedented structure. And in the process, we thought that it will be wonderful to have industry leaders who have global experience and understanding of the ecosystem in India as well as elsewhere in the world, and to tell us about how can we innovate, reinvent ourselves in India. I think it's very good. As far as India is concerned, we all know 60-70% of the economy is already service economy. And now, but we have been in the service mode where cost plus model has been a traditional way of doing things. Now we have to really embark on creating value through invention, innovation, new business models, and stuff like that. I would say, in short, that if Silicon Valley is a hub for technological innovations, India is also a hub for social innovation because in terms of innovation, in India, scalability is high and cost of failure is low. And so there are so many advantages, including in the medical field, clinical trials. I think we have one of the finest fertile grounds. So I think we can discuss all those subjects. I do not want to take away the thunder from what our honored speakers are going to talk, and Milind Antani is going to lead us into this discussion. Thank you so much. Really appreciate, and most welcome each one of our panelists and guests, and all the audience that is on the WebEx call. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Nishith Bhai, for setting the ball really rolling pretty fast. When we talk of innovations, I think one word, one sentence that comes to my mind is innovate or evaporate. Are we really there? And when we talk of Indian pharma industry, which is the industry, and we have been known as manufacturing hub, I have my own questions. Are we really hub? Are we really what people think? And especially when certain crises come, always bring challenges. And when you have to embrace the challenge to create that opportunity to become a winner, only one thing that will come is innovation. And I'm so happy today that we have industry veterans having uh, unbelievable experience, insights, thought leadership to share their thoughts with us. And I'm so happy. So I think I will, without wasting much time, I will just move on to the eminent panelists with my questions. My first question, I'm going to ask all questions to all panelists. But my first question is, the title, from making India to innovate in India. Now, can you elaborate this statement? I will start with you, Sharad, first.
Thanks, Milind. Yes, the title is interesting indeed, because we have seen a lot of focus, a lot of thoughts about manufacture in India. Even the government's tagline of "Make in India" is all seemingly all about manufacturing, creating jobs due to manufacturing, talking about investments in manufacturing. But manufacturing comes at a later stage in the entire life cycle of a product. I mean, first you have to think of a product. First you have to innovate and talk about what new can you do. So it's good to be in the manufacturing space, but as we have seen earlier with a lot of economies, whether we take Japan, whether we take Korea, and now whether we take China, yes, manufacturing comes first in the life cycle of the of a country's, let's say, economic growth. But unless you get into the innovation space, you don't really create that impact on the global economy, which otherwise you would be expected to create. So if India really wishes to become an economic powerhouse as a global entity, the manufacturing part of its focus needs to shift towards innovation on what new can we contribute to the rest of the world. We always talk in terms of a lot of our past glory and history, starting with the invention of zero, etc., etc. But can we look at the next 100 years to say what will we contribute now as the next invention? I think that's where the narrative needs to move.
Thank you very much, Sharad.
Thank you so much, Milind, and of course, Nishith Bhai, thank you for this opportunity. I think during COVID times, no better time than to come together with all friends to discuss some of the futuristic things that we can do. Now, your first question, Milind, was that what does it mean to me when it comes to from make in India in pharmaceuticals to innovate in India? For me, it's very simple. You can't sustain make in India for a long term unless you innovate in India also. I don't think our make in India strategy will sustain for a long time if we are not able to do a value addition through the innovation. And we'll come to that during the course of our panel discussion. But if you look at the history of our pharmaceutical industry over the last 60 years, from a very nascent stage, we have got the tag of pharmacy of the world. That's something to really be very proud about. I mean, few industries you can be very proud about in this country, and I think pharmaceutical industry is one of them. And all credit to Indian pharmaceutical industry for having taken that whole issue of make in India very successfully. Look at some of the data. 60% of the world's vaccine are manufactured in India. More than 35% of the AIDS patients in Africa are receiving the ARVs from our country, manufactured here in India. So we have been a very good lion's share of generics in United States is from India. So clearly we have got a place as far as make in India, manufacture in India. There's no doubt about it. But if you really look at the value chain, 2/3 of the world market of pharmaceuticals is in innovation. It's not just in manufacturing. So here is a huge opportunity that awaits our industry where we have done so well. We have the infrastructure, we have all the things going for us. And it has definitely helped. The disease burden has come down between 1990 and 2016. I had the data that, it's come down dramatically. Treatment cost is less than 5% of the world's cost. So clearly India is a cost advantage that we have here. Given this kind of environment where we employ close to 2.7 million people in our industry and we have close to 10 billion US dollar of trade surplus that we have, so we have things going for us. So to me, going from make in India to innovate in India is a wake up call for the industry. We simply can't delay it anymore.
Thank you very much, Shailesh. Ranjit is still not with us. So,
Yes,
Vaidheesh,
I'm back. I'm back. Can you hear me?
okay. Yeah, very well. Thank you very
Well,
much, sir.
we
Your
switched the
thoughts.
connection.
Yeah, your thoughts,
Okay.
please.
Just I had started by saying that economies go through a process going from agrarian economy to manufacturing economy to services economy and to innovation economy. Whereas in India, we went straight from the agrarian economy to the services economy. And to make India, to innovate in India is a leap of faith, so to speak, but a big leap nevertheless. And to my mind, it requires three prerequisites. One is, of course, the appropriate infrastructure. The second one is a regulatory environment, which is very progressive. And of course, most important is a change in mindset to move away from imitate in India to innovate in India. So, it's a huge paradigm shift, but its time has come. And again, the government needs to move away from being a regulator to a facilitator. which is what the intention is. And clearly they're moving in this direction, but speed is very important for all of us. So, to innovate in India, we need some huge investments, although the cost will be much less than what is there abroad. We need to develop the skills in innovation. We have young people who had great chemistry skills, copying chemistry, but biological skills are very important. So we have to create a whole brand new environment which fosters innovation. And again, I know we'll discuss this later a little bit, but strong protection of intellectual property rights. We have, in many respects, in the pharmaceutical industry, best-in-class manufacturing units here. We all know, I don't need to repeat the numbers of how much we export, to which country we export, but we are really the pharmacy to the world, but we're not the manufacturing hub to the world. We're not the innovation hub to the world, which is the direction we need to go to. And we have to create a visible momentum, energy, and optimism. And our youth is ready. We have such a huge, great demographic dividend. We've got some of the best educational institutes. So we need to bring all these elements together and make sure that we really leapfrog to innovate in India, because we've lost out quite a few years thinking about it. Now, time for action.
Thank you very much, Ranjit. Vaidheesh, your take on the statements from Make in India to Innovate in India.
First and foremost, hello to Nishith Bhai and also to you for setting up this nice panel discussion. It's very, very important conversation we need to have. So first and foremost, I think this subject is a very big subject. This requires a deep contemplation. The reason why I say this, because a make in India or make in United States, make in China, every country has their own concept of making in their country, is very contextual. And we somewhere down the line, we get caught into a slogan and forget the context. When Mahatma Gandhi wanted to do Make in India and Swadeshi movement, it was meant to get the Britishers out of the country and destroy the market in India so that there is no market is available and then you create your own with the Swadeshi movement, right? Now, there was a context in which the Make in India was relevant at a point of time where you have to make everything on your own. Over a period of time, we recognize the fact that you don't need to make everything in your country. There are some things that are very unique to you, you make in India, and the rest, what you, because at the end of the day, what is making or buying is a strategic decision. Whether you make or buy, right, is based on the cost situation. It's what it means to a common man. If electrical, circuitry for Ganpati Puja, if we can get it at 50 rupees from China, the people are going to buy it from China, right? Now, what we all need to recognize is it is contextual, and where when the API went, we were the bulk drug manufacturer leaders at a point of time, and then we said it's a good idea to focus on formulation and give the bulk drug to China to manufacture. So you moved up the value chain. So as far as I'm concerned, because of this today, the pandemic situation, I think it has become very political and everybody is back onto the Swadeshi feeling of make it America for America, India for India, and all those stuff is happening. So what I would look at this whole make in India, particularly from pharma industry, given the context, uh, we got to be careful about jingoism on make in India, because when you said make in India, the technology has gone so much. I can make 8 billion tablets with only 100 people working on it with fully automated artificial intelligence running the manufacturing unit. So it's not about creation of job. If it is about security of drugs in your country because you don't want to be taken over by China for your purpose, then that you're talking about make in India. So question which you have to recognize is that as a country, are we scared of what's happening to our neighbors? And if the drug security is going to be very critical, then whether you like it or not, make sure that you accelerate the API manufacturing, uh, the entire processes, accelerate, put investment. That's what government is trying to do. Is it the right business decision? I'm not sure. Because at the end of the day, business is run based on various factors. So Make in India at this point of time is essential because contextually we believe that we want a drug security. So that's why we need to make everything here, right from the plastic cap to intermediates to APIs, right? So that's where I would say from a Make in India point of view, it might change with over a period of time, with the climatic condition, geopolitical situation happens, suddenly people will say, decentralized, focus on what you're good at. So at this point of time, Make in India is relevant for drug security. Let's focus on it. Innovate in India is a very different concept. Probably I'll talk to you in a subsequent session.
Sure. Thank you very much, Vaidheesh. I think what comes out is, I think manufacturing India is there, but not there. I think we are here. We need to be there. And what I understand from all the responses that innovation and manufacturing need to walk in tandem, and otherwise you don't walk in tandem unless there's innovation. Proper manufacturing will not happen. And as Vaidheesh mentioned, context is very important. So I'll move on to second question. And Ranjit, I would want you to answer this first. No, we discussed about India is a manufacturing hub. Of course, not actually the hub. We are a pharmacy, as you mentioned, and there is a significant export component also, which Shailesh also mentioned and Sharad also mentioned. But when crisis always brings some opportunity, and possibly there is an opportunity, possibly with the challenge, I'm not sure, but there is a possibility or opportunity to scale up. I just want to know from you what and how. Just your take on that. What to
Okay.
scale up, how to scale up.
Okay, so the evolution of India's manufacturing export did not follow textbook pattern as we talked about earlier. So we still have a technologically advanced service sector and relatively lagging manufacturing sector. Okay, so that's the playbook we are in at the moment. And also, India, in terms of export, barely makes it to the top 20 countries exporting in the world. And all I export, as we heard from Nishith also, 55-60% is services. So we have to also look at the quality, sophistication, and complexity of this market, which we have to cater to. And this coronavirus discontinuity is an opportunity. And the question is, as you asked, is will India be the world's manufacturing factory? We are the pharmacy to the world, but we are not the manufacturing factory to the world. We are far from that. I mean, it is, of course, too ambitious to say at the moment, but we should have a quick look at this and some quick wins if they're possible. Because, the global backlash against China is an opportunity. And we have to have some early mover advantage on that because, and also choose the segments and countries carefully. Because against China, every country wants to be self-sufficient. We saw how in America, President Trump has given some 484 million to a company whose name we hadn't heard before to start manufacturing product for the coronavirus. So, most of these places again in manufacturing and export have strict deadlines. So it's not only about manufacturing and technology, but for example, we need to have the right infrastructure, the ports, the highways, the regulatory system. Because remember, the supply chain and the deadlines for export are extremely tight. And we haven't got that machinery well oiled and well geared. So at the moment, if you ask me, countries like Vietnam, South Korea, Taiwan, and even Bangladesh seem to be some favorite countries compared to India. I'm talking of the mindset, you see.
Yes.
So there has to be some very visible jumpstart, both in terms of policy, branding, and action on the ground. So also, I want to see whether with the entrepreneurs and industry, is there appetite to invest in this? Because I go back to example of how it took 20 years for India, let's say, to decimate the Western pharma industry to become a manufacturing hub. And it took another 20 years for China to decimate India's fermentation capacity and the rest of it to take over there. Now we want to bring it all back to India. So it's not going to be an overnight thing. I think there's an opportunity, but the next 2 years are very critical how we can really lay the ground very fast for this.
Thank you very much, Ranjit. Shailesh, your take on this.
Yeah, Milind, I would pick it up from where Ranjit started by saying that there is this whole China factor, which has suddenly become a very critical aspect the world is noticing that we are depending a lot on China, whether it is API or whether it's large scale manufacturing capabilities. And most of the countries are saying that, look, this is a bit risky scenario. This gives Indian pharmaceutical industry a unique opportunity. COVID has brought some opportunity, and there's no doubt about that. Now, if you know, this morning when I woke up, I actually saw the BBC News on my iPad, and now all of you must have seen it. And what was there? Right in front, they said hydroxychloroquine has been now decided that is not going to be indicated by the US FDA. But there was a photograph of the box. And if you all of you have seen that box, it said Zydus, manufactured by Zydus in India. Now, let me tell you, this is a huge thing to have on a global platform. It is your country's product which is being shown to the world, that when it was absolutely needed, it was India which stood up and produced these medicines and made it available to the world over. Brazilian president or Trump or whoever it is, they all appreciated what India did in a record speed. So there is clearly an opportunity that we see. The question for us is, how do we tap this opportunity? Very quickly, I feel a couple of things are needed to be done. One is we need to really pick our battles. You can't be, as Sharad was mentioning and Vaidheesh mentioned, you can't be good at everything. So we really need to pick our battle. For example, Indian government said manufacture stents in India, manufacture the orthopedic implants in India. Now, can you imagine, the whole market in India is less than 500 million. The global market is 9 billion. And the 80% of stents are manufactured in Ireland. Can you compete with Ireland, which has got all the ecosystem? And now our government of India, if it pushes our Indian industry to somehow manufacture the stents in India, it will never fly. So this is where I think the policymakers and our industry has to decide which battle to pick. Number two, where China has actually failed to some extent, is this made in China doesn't necessarily mean high quality. And this perception we must try and avoid in our country. We must ensure that we should be obsessive about quality. That anything that we produce, whether for Indian consumption or whether it is for export, that it has got to be top quality. If we make these two things, choose the right battle and obsessive about quality, I think we will take the battle ahead to become truly a manufacturing hub for pharmaceuticals in the world.
Thank you very much, Shailesh. Now, Vaidheesh, I move on to you to please share your thoughts on the same topic.
Yeah, so I think good amount of stuff has been said. There is only a couple of points that I will make on this front is, we are all missing one big opportunity. There are something like 15 molecules are coming off the cliff. And which is the country which will have what it takes to take care of the molecule which are falling off the cliff? And they're all going to be specialty generics. Now it's only India. So in my opinion, at this point of time, if I say the biggest opportunity in India is to go after those patent cliffs that has happened, which is India has been good in that. And we need to build that capability, and let's not lose sight of what we are good at from a point of view of making sure taking care of those patent cliffs. The Innovate in India is a little bit, particularly in the pharma industry, I would handle it with care. Because in pharma industry at this point of time, let's continue to focus on what we are good at, which is going after the branded generic and specialty generic and in biosimilars, right? I think let's start applying our energy and investment behind biologics, which is going to be the future, where in biosimilar, let's figure out how to come up with innovation. Because the future in the pharma, the world is going to be all biologics, no more chemistry. But the one which is going to fall off the cliff are the chemistry ones. So that will take care of you for the next 15 to 20 years. The need of India where the average longevity is still 67, 68, it's not equal to rest of the world. It will take another 10, 20 to 25 years for us to catch up, for us to say, let's innovate for something on a unique cancer drugs, which will take our life longevity from 80 to 100, right? So the Western world are all figuring out what it takes their aging population to live longer for another 10 or 15 years. Whereas in India, we are trying to make sure our people live longer from 68 to 70, right? So as far as I'm concerned, at this point of time, the opportunities are very clear for pharma industry in India. I won't lose my sleep over trying to fight against the drug discovery of the big 10, 15 companies in US. Let them do what they are supposed to do. Let's focus on what we are good at. As far as uh, you know, competing with China for getting those the raw materials to be bulk drugs to be manufactured in India. Maybe that's from point of view of protecting our own internal interest of Indian patients. So I think there are two a chapter to it. One is for taking care of the Indian patient. The other one is taking care of the world patients on the patented, non-patented drugs. I think these are the two pathways are very clear for the Indian companies.
Thank you very much. A very interesting perspective to it. Now, Sharad, your thoughts, please.
So, well, almost everything has been said in terms of how we should be looking at India from a manufacturing perspective. I have just a couple of thoughts to add. The point Shailesh had brought up about quality. I think that's probably the most important point when we are looking at the world starting to trust and rely on India as a source of products. We do export a lot. We send it to the US, but there has also been enough criticism about India's quality policies and the quality of products. Now, without without anyone trying to read in between the lines of what I am saying, what is important is you can't be a Michelin star chef outside and make rubbish at your home. Okay, quality will have to start at home. We will have to start ensuring that the Indian patients also get the kind of quality that we are expecting the world to get. And somewhere there is a role for policy also, because you can't keep treating also pharmaceutical industry as a routine MSME kind of a thing where anyone with pots and pans can get a unit up and running and start producing products. There's a need to strengthen the regulatory environment. There's a need to strengthen the policy. There's a need to focus on quality as a whole. And then if that happens, then you will be in a situation to say that I can make highest quality products possibly for everyone in the world, including my own country. And I think that is where the half the battle will be won. For the future, of course, China is way ahead in biosimilars, and we need to catch up. But that's a separate topic. So I wanted to focus only this one aspect, that if we have to become genuinely the pharmacy for the world, you can't do that into the future without focusing on quality.
A very, very important point. I think that is one of the biggest element for India to be known as a global player, and that is where I think quality is going to play. Of course, as you mentioned, a lot of dots need to be connected from regulations to infrastructure to the mindset itself. That I need, as you very rightly mentioned, that the Michelin star chef create amazing dishes in the restaurant, and I'm reminded of Vikas Khanna, the three Michelin star chef in one of the Master Chef show, that ऐसी चीज बनाओ जो यहाँ अच्छी लगे लेकिन घर पे भी खा सके. That is what I think very important, and Vaidheesh and Ranjit and Shailesh also mentioned on focus on swimming in the known waters first, then jumping into the unknown waters. So I think we talked about how exactly the transition is required, where exactly we are on manufacturing, and when what needs to be innovated. Now let me move on to innovation part now. You know, this is the time when everybody talks about innovating a lot. Innovations could be short-term innovations, innovation could be long-term innovations. And innovating per se in a pharma space is not going to be very easy. It's going to come with a lot of challenges. So I just want you that what are the challenges India would have, the players would have in overcoming those challenges to have innovations in place, could be short term or rather what that innovation is for that matter, and how to overcome them. So, Shailesh, I want your thoughts first.
Thank you, Milind. I think it's a very very critical question, and first thought comes to my mind is what prevents us from becoming an innovative country, and I think it is mental block to start with. You know, before you start blaming the government and the ecosystem and the regulation and so on and so forth, do we have as manufacturers? We are manufacturing. Let's put it this way: we are manufacturing kings of pharma. Clearly, we have done good job. We just talked about it a few minutes ago. Question is, do we have the same killing instinct when it comes to innovation? And the answer so far is no. One of the reasons has been that our industry has evolved over a period of time thanks to a very favorable patent law, which allowed the Indian industry for the bulk of its existence in so many years. We were able to very quickly understand the chemistry, do the reverse engineering, and come up with excellent products at affordable prices. And that brought a great amount of glory to India. And we said, this is where we are very good at. But in the process, we lost the appetite for really trying to do things that we can innovate and show to the world that we are able to do this. Now, how do we bring that animal spirit back into our industry? Because now that the patent regime is there, product patents are there, can India really still be a pharmacy of the world in 10 years from now? That would require innovation. Let's look at some data points and we will know what challenges I'm talking about. Very quickly, 2018, China had new medicine entities, 79 of them. In India, it's 18. If you look at the academic publications, there were 78,000 publications from China. India published 18,000. Medical, I'm talking about. Let's look at VC funding. 17 billion US dollars in China. In India, 1 billion. Look at the difference that we have got. The spend on R&D is about 20 billion in China. In India, it is 3 billion. So clearly, we have a major issue when it comes to all these aspects of how we create an ecosystem. So how do we really overcome this issue? 5 or 6 things. I won't go into details, but broadly speaking, regulatory landscape, clearly we need to work on it because Indian regulatory system delayed applications, ambiguity, except clinical trials, most of the things needs to be still worked upon. So there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done on regulatory landscape. Funding and reward to companies who will go into innovation. There are obscene examples to show how China has done it. We need to learn from there. Academic and industry collaboration is visibly low in India. That needs to be really improved. Innovation clusters. Boston is an innovation cluster in United States. Similarly, you have Chengdu in China, which is a major innovation center. How can we create such clusters in India where companies can come together, good people can come back and work on it? Talent pool. China got 250,000 people coming back from US to their country to do this whole innovation journey. Can India attract our own people who are in the United States to come back to India and take the reins of innovation? That's something that we need to do. And finally, we need to outreach and promote India as an innovative country to all the stakeholders so that we are recognized as a country which believes in innovation. So there are these 5, 6 things that we need to address in an ecosystem to really become an innovative country in the future.
Thank you, Shailesh. Vaidheesh, your thoughts on this point.
Yeah. So now, fundamentally, first, I'm a strong believer in first defining what you are talking about, right? Innovation, by definition, is a creativity that has a significant business or a social impact. Any creativity which does not have any of this impact is a waste of time chasing your tail, right? Which many people think creativity is equal to innovation. Now, very interestingly, second, we need to ask you that, do you want to innovate for India or you want to innovate for the world? Now, if you really look at innovation, more than the pharma industry, I think the innovation is required for a healthcare industry in this country. I think first and foremost, I strongly believe first we need to innovate a healthcare system for our country.
Very true.
So rather than looking at innovating drugs or a device, like for example, Shailesh was mentioning, we are trying to come up with a greenfield for medical devices, and nobody is going to come because size itself is not sufficient. So first and fundamentally, we need to first innovate our healthcare system and define the purpose of our healthcare system. Once you have innovated, that is very appropriate, which will have a big impact to this country. I think then we can answer many of these questions, right? Whether you need to have an innovative patient care pathway, correct? Using digital as a model, or there are multiple ways. I'm not going to preempt. There's a lot of stuff that people are discussing about. Second, it's very it's a misnomer to say the Indians don't innovate. In some of the specialty, India has done an outstanding job of innovation, and we have a pilots of innovations. We have what I call the islands of innovation. You look at Arvind Eye Hospital, 3 lakh eye surgeries are being done at $50. Amazing innovation, right? No intraocular lens is being imported. They manufacture it within that. What they did is that they innovated the supply chain of the care pathway. You look at LV Prasad, you look at Shankar Netrala. Actually, we are the world leader in ophthalmology. In every aspect of ophthalmology, we lead, right? So if you look at every specialty, we do a phenomenal innovation. Now, the question that we need to continue to ask is that where is an opportunity, where we need to be having an impact, rather than saying innovation was innovation in generality. Pick an area, like for example, cancer treatment. Is it something which is important? Like for example, right now we are in Corona, right? Now the Corona as a context has created a phenomenal innovation, animal spirit of our people. Look at the kind of, like our Prime Minister said, how we quickly came up with all kinds of stuff within a month's time. We have
Yes.
beaten the record. So I somehow believe is a simple definition which I'm been trained to look at. It's called LEAP. For innovation, first and foremost, you need to have a leadership, you need an environment, you need an aspiration, and you need a process.
Very true.
Now, today in Corona, aspiration has been set. Now, leadership is coming. Now, we are creating an environment. Now, we need to put a process in place. You will have a phenomenal innovation that will happen in relation to Corona. I think first and foremost, concluding, I would say we need to first and foremost decide, is there a big need for innovating for India, for healthcare, or for making sure our people can live 68 average to 78, which is what is
Very
happening
true.
in other parts of the world.
That's very, very, very important perspective, and I'm very happy on that. So, Sharad, your thoughts, please.
Okay, an extension of somewhat what other people have said. You know, we have always been in many ways proud, as well as we have told the world that we are a nation, and we use the word jugaad. Now, jugaad, to my mind, is nothing but incremental innovation. And if you believe that India is probably one of the best in incremental innovation, and that's the kind of examples Vaidheesh was giving, why won't you encourage the Indian innovators to be able to patent and reap the fruits of patents for incremental innovation? Contrary to and I'm not talking about Section 3D, etc., but contrary to saying that incremental innovation should not be allowed, I think India is the place incremental innovation should be encouraged, because there is so much talent in taking a concept and creating a huge amount of potentially different benefits from it. And if you can't encourage them, then you are actually killing your own innovative spirit. And this is where I can't understand this whole concept, because we have assumed that the multinationals are here to extend patents, and therefore there is this the entire thing about incremental innovation is bad, etc. But actually, if you see in the country, incremental innovation is flourishing, but you are not allowing them to be patented. You're not allowing an incremental innovation originator to get some sort of a royalty on his patient, on his patent, etc. Imagine if you created that kind of an ecosystem, how many people will try to create different innovations. So I just want to focus on this part, because there is no better country than India to be able to capitalize on it.
Very true. I think very important perspective and different thought process in what innovation can be, how innovation can be, and what are the challenges. And picking up the word what Ranjit mentioned, that becoming facilitator from regulators is going to play a significant role. Now, one important point, I think, again, one thought to all of you is that we are there on manufacturing. We need to scale up. We need to go high. We need to think of innovations in India, start innovating in India. There are opportunities in COVID has come, and everybody mentioned that swim in a known water first, think of us first, then the world. People are looking at world. China possibly, as Ranjit mentioned, people there is some kind of aversion for the word China, which possibly multiplied today afternoon. But coming back, if we all do, we overcome these challenges to some extent. Regulators are changing a little bit towards facilitating rather than regulating. People used to call it, it is not regulation, it is more of a strangulation for pharma. But things are slowly changing. So I just want to understand from all of you, where do you see Indian pharma industry from Make in India to Innovate India? We need to manufacture, we need to innovate. And having all what we discussed so far, where do you see Indian pharma industry maybe 2 3 years or maybe next few years? Would you see increase in the transactions? There was a mention about investments, etc., many still compared to China and other countries. Do you see transactions, corporate transactions like investments or merger rather than merger acquisitions happening? People looking at more at innovations to bring them up to create an impact in the society for India first and then globally. Or would there be a paradigm shift totally to achieve what I'm just asking? So I just want your take on where do you see industry in next few years, maybe 2 years to maybe 6 7 8 years. I will start with Vaidheesh first.
Yeah. Milind, only thing is that I really want to ask you to repeat the question from a point of view of specifically what is that you're looking for.
Okay, where do you see Indian pharma industry in next few years? Let me simplify. Would there be increase in corporate transactions, that big eating, big fish eating, small fish? There could be significant increase in investments in innovators. Would there be emergence of startups on innovations, something like that? What do you see happening? Or there
No,
is going to be a
I,
paradigm shift?
no, I know, but that's what I wanted to know. Are you looking at it from a very simplistic uh, private equity funding and trying
No
to
general,
take?
nothing, no general. Where do you see
Yeah.
pharma industry in next few
Yeah.
years?
Yeah. See, I think the pharma industry will continue to be growing at the way in which is growing at about 8 to 10%. As a country, we still have diabetes and cardiovascular. NCD is still not yet resolved. Many of the diseases are still not resolved. For us to come to a conclusion, what will happen to this industry, at least I would say next to 8 to 10 years, the industry will continue to grow in India. There are two parts to it. One is from an India perspective, still the drugs are very essential for our patients in this country. Many of the new drugs will be launched by many of the Indian companies. As I told you, many of the drugs that are going off patent will come to India, which will be at an affordable price. Many of the Indian companies are looking at that. And I think the multinational companies are also looking at the specialty drugs that has certain specific space. Many companies are launching. I think there's a good climate that is being created by regulators on clinical trials. I think there is a bit of positivity amongst the multinational companies to launch. Of course, still there are some obstacles to manage, but we have a good climate happening. So you are going to see some good launches happening from MNCs on the specialty drugs to be made available in India. I, if you ask me, I'm pretty upbeat about the pharma industry, and there will be some consolidation that will happen. The quality awareness will continue to go up. Thanks to, I shouldn't be saying thanks to, but I think Corona the pandemic has really created a lot of awareness to the people of this whole concept of what is the meaning of quality and why it's important. You know, people didn't even know who is ICMR. Now every common man will talk about ICMR, right? And the people are keep talking about what's happening to phase 3, phase 2. You know, the conversation has become so, in one way it's good. There's a lot of awareness. There's going to be a lot of quality push. Our regulators are going to be far more on the front foot when it comes to. So I see a very positive climate for Indian pharma industry as we move forward. Our Indian patients, I'm quite sure, will get the latest drugs that's going to be made available with MNCs.
Thank you. Sharad, your thoughts?
Thanks, Milind. I will break this question into two parts actually. One is how will the pharma industry in India evolve, and the other is how will the Indian pharma manufacturers or the industry itself evolve from a perspective of a globalization or a global footprint. You know, most of the large Indian companies have almost 50% of their sales outside India, or even more. There are many which have even more outside India. And the current situation gives the impression in the government, in the industry, that there is a huge opportunity for India to be able to step up and be recognized even more in the world outside India from a perspective of being able to provide high quality medicines. And that's a narrative we are hearing from the government, from the industry leaders also. So I believe that there will be a huge amount of effort made to become more and more attractive to the rest of the world, especially as compared to, let's say, China. Because one of the thoughts is that, okay, is it always going to be just about trying to buying everything from the lowest cost producer, or is it going to be trying to hedge your bets with the most reliable producer? We would like to ideally become the most reliable partner for the rest of the world when it comes to supply of pharmaceutical products. The second part for the global supply as well as for India would be an increased dependence. You know, this whole concept of Atmanirbhar. India was always extremely good in making APIs. It was just the cost pressure that pushed a lot of the emphasis on importing from China where they were cheaper. Now, if the Indian industry can rally and invest a lot of effort and investments behind becoming much bigger and better in APIs, where India always had a strength globally compared to China, I think things will change a lot for the industry as well, because that will lead to stronger intermediate manufacturing, many more API manufacturing, and we have huge volumes consumed in India as well. The Indian pharma industry itself, I believe, and I would like to see, in the topic being on innovation, like Vaidheesh said, that higher quality products from multinationals coming into India, Indian companies are partnering with the multinationals. That trend should continue, and I believe that partnering should move towards the innovation part also. Although not directly comparable, but the one of the thoughts that comes to my mind, having also been in that industry, is the way the automotive industry in India has evolved. If you look at the way the Tatas, Bajaj, Mahindra has evolved into turning out world-class products locally as a result of collaborations with other global companies, is the kind of direction you would like to see to say how innovation can happen here. And I think that's the kind of evolution I hope that will happen.
Thank you very much, Sharad. Ranjit, your thoughts, please.
So, it's a brave man who predicts the future of the pharma industry, the health industry. But very shortly, I know we're running out of time.
No,
But
we have a 15 minutes extension plan.
okay.
So we
So,
have time.
the industry is definitely going to go through good double-digit growth in the future. And there is a reason for this. The fundamental reason is the demographics. People are living longer. The longer you live, the more pharmaceuticals you need, the more healthcare support you need. And second is, of course, lifestyle diseases. These are increasing quite dramatically. So on both counts, certainly the pharma industry is going to have a good growth. Secondly, within India, today pharma industry still distributes most of its products in the metro cities and small towns, but 2/3 of our population have no access. So like the FMCG industry, which went into interior, I think pharma industry also needs to make sure that the generic products, branded generic, are available in the interior, which of course will require the additional healthcare infrastructure support system by the government. So there is a potential, and we're talking the next 5 to 10 years, that period. So there is the domestic part of it where there's growth. Sharad has already mentioned export. I only want to make the additional point, while there is a huge opportunity to expand our export and manufacturing base in India, but this should not be at the expense of domestic availability and access. Because currently the way export is, that is certainly more profitable. The domestic product is highly price controlled, sometimes draconianly price controlled. And that's the reason why some of these APIs disappeared from manufacturing here. So government has to have the right kind of model, maybe a cross-subsidy model, which gives enough return to the shareholder, the pharma industry, but also does not make access to medicine cheaper to the people. And finally, innovation going ahead, that is certainly a peg that we have to hang our coat on, because without that, in the future, we are doomed. And so investments in research, public-private partnerships, finally, AI and VR and 3D nanotechnology, all this are coming. I mean, we've had such a strong base of science in our country. It's time we capitalize on that. So I expect the future to be good and bright for industry, but also to be contributory to our healthcare system. And I know this discussion was only on pharma industry, but the real challenge is the bigger infrastructure in healthcare and other issues. Topic for another seminar, webinar for you.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Shailesh, your take. Shailesh?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was on mute. No, I was saying that I'm totally in line with my fellow panelist when it comes to the way we look at the pharma industry of the future. Having spent 35 years in this industry, I still have a dream. I still have a dream to see that none of the Indian patients ever go without medicines, and they are able to afford it, and they're able to get it. And I think Indian pharma industry is capable of reaching that stage very soon. The question for me is that in our entire career, we haven't seen a moment like this. We are actually in an inflection point. Today, the Prime Minister is talking about nothing but healthcare industry and pharma. We never had this going so good. You go to regulator, he is willing to open the door instantly. You go to commerce minister, he says, how can I help you? You go to finance ministry, is going to talk about, how can we help and support this? If this industry does not take this opportunity today to then clearly look at that the technology is already there, there's so much of several opportunity are coming because of technology. The regulator is open. He's open to suggestions and willing to do things differently. Private equity and venture capitalists are bringing funding to India because they are saying we have nowhere else to invest. Let's invest in India because it's a growth market. So funding should be coming very, very good. For a change, government is supportive. And the academia is also listening to say, hey, we need to partner with the industry. If government and our industry is open to collaborative spirit, as Sharad was mentioning, one fact, Milind, I would like to tell you that in China, the multinational companies are having 45% of their exports, worldwide exports, coming from China. India can also do the same. We can be a most attractive destination for multinational company to set their shops here. We just need to ensure that we have that ability to welcome collaboration and have the dream of becoming not just make in India, but make and develop in India both.
Oh,
It's possible to do it.
excellent thoughts. I think I have no words to sum up or anything. Excellent thoughts, and we have many questions also. Many questions are covered also. But before we move on to question and answer session, I have my colleague Gowree Gokhale. She co-hosts practice with me at Nishith Desai Associates, and she's a veteran pharma and IP lawyer and in international commercial transactions. So, Gowree, your quick comments and if any question you have, maybe 2, 3 minutes.
Sure. So I think this this entire discussion was quite overwhelming, and I have pages and pages written down with me already on various thoughts. But I'll try to put a perspective on basis whatever I've heard. As we have seen, the world has pressed a reset button. And when I was listening to one of the panels, some other panel where Professor Yunus basically made a very interesting comment. He said that when we reopen, right, when we unlock, if we continue from the past world and take that with us, whether we'll be doing justice to ourselves, because somewhere the system has failed, right? So can we revisit, and I'm just may not be in so many words, but can we sort of restructure what we had before, and can we start afresh? So whatever thoughts I heard just now, whether they can be a blueprint for the future, with whatever thoughts we heard today. The second development that we saw, whilst at a political level, people are talking about reverse globalization, each country looking inwards. At the same time, what we realized in this entire pandemic situation, that the collaborations for the drug development or healthcare solutions were coming from all across the world, right? So somewhere at a humanity level, there were solutions required, and people indeed collaborated across the world, and there was nothing with MNC versus Indian pharma or otherwise. It was a combined solution or a combined thought process that was coming out. So somewhere that they versus us or otherwise, that entire mindset, somewhere we saw not really continuing in that perspective. The other thing I think Vaidheesh and others mentioned, which is very important when we talk about pharma, it is not in isolation, it is a part of a healthcare solution, right? So it is just one of the solutions for healthcare, which is whether it is diagnostic, remedial, or otherwise, there are so many other solutions. So I think the questions that we need to ask ourselves is, whatever we are talking about is why, what, and how, right? Why are we discussing this? Is a healthcare sort of solutions to the public, and then we spoke about good jugaad and all of that. So in the Indian context, are we saying that only pharmaceutical companies? I'm sorry, but all of you are pharmaceutical companies one way or other. But can the pharmaceutical companies think about solutions, because you have studied healthcare for, or the disease pattern for so many years, where the solutions are not necessarily linked to only pharmaceutical or medical device solutions? Can there be different solutions which combine with the products or the like, where you are giving a solution to the world, and whether India can come forward with its traditional knowledge, with the knowledge that the MNCs bring to the table in terms of data, etc. Can there be a combined solution, that one can talk about, and can India give that innovation to the world, that we are not just talking about like a linear innovation, but a drastic innovation for healthcare maintenance? So I think some of these thoughts, and I mean I can go on, but I thought I'll just put
No,
this
we are,
perspective to
yeah.
the table, on looking at it slightly differently, and then creating a new blueprint for the world, and whether India can lead the way there.
Thank you very much, Gowree. I think that was a very interesting discussion, and we have very interesting questions also. But before we move on to questions, and as I mentioned, we have extended timeline to 7:15 to cover a few questions. Some interesting questions have come. But I want Nishith Bhai, because when we think of innovation, Nishith Bhai comes to our mind, and the way he thinks innovation is very different. So, Nishith Bhai, your maybe 2 3 minutes from you.
Of course, I think innovation is something very exciting to all of us, and I think a statement was made that we need to have what is called instinct, innovation instinct. Very good expression, I think, and I I think it does exist in some ways, but we have to bring out that whole confidence in the people that we can do it. And without blowing our own trumpet, I remember when Financial Times of London started the most innovative law firm uh, awards, in whole of Asia. uh, we felt that from India, what innovation. But when we started working on it, I think consistently we are ranked somewhere on the top, either number one, two, three, something like that. in whole of Asia on the legal tax innovations and stuff like that. So what we also found was that the moment we make up our mind that we can innovate, we will innovate, number one. Number two, that make in India. My frank thinking at this point in time, we are at least about 2 to 3 years away. Because in India, biggest problem is regulatory. Funding is not a problem. I think, Shailesh mentioned about funding. Funding, there's so much dry powder with private equity. They would put money both in greenfield as well as in the brownfield or existing ones. So funding is not so much of a problem for a particular pharma industry. And I don't think there will be too much of a problem if at all we have good idea and good project. And now what do we do while the regulatory framework? Everybody wants to do it. When you talk to ministers, when you talk to other people, that we have great opportunity in front of us, or we need to change. But the problem is the speed of change. Today we are in an age what you call internet world, where 3 months makes a year. It's no longer 1 year. It's 3 months makes a year. So if you're delayed by 3 months, that means you're delayed by a year in comparison to the world. So we have to have a speed of decision making, which is what unfortunately is lacking either because of our overall system or otherwise, and the way in which we move. So we have to move very, very fast if you want to. But yes, it would happen. We are also a democratic country. We recognize that. So it can have debate and discussion, but it cannot be perpetual. So we have to move very, very fast as far as decision making is concerned. Government knows what to do. A lot of suggestions have been made how to do it. It is just execution, which is always say that about 70-80% of anything besides strategy is execution. So execution is somewhere we are lacking, which is what we need to really work on. But as is there no solution to that? In fact, one of the strategic discussion we are doing in the next week, I believe, or in the week after next, in the cCep session, is Make in India via Far East. So today, Vietnam, Cambodia, and other countries are moving at a very high speed. And if at all, supply chain has to be, it is already broken, but if it is to be brought in to India, before it comes to India, can we do something together in those jurisdictions? And in 2, 3 years' time, when the system in India improves, then we bring those facilities to India. And in those interim period, we can innovate. And I think the entire focus has to be on the innovation. I think this is a very opportune session. And we have to build a culture of innovation in India Inc. The mindset. Also, a point was made that, the kind of reward system or stuff like that. I think we'll have to work out some of those things, which is very, very well articulated. And there is a system now because we have people who have created unicorns in India. It's not impossible. We are recognized for our talent, intellect, and other kind of stuff. I think it is just the risk-taking ability, and I think apart from the startup, even there could be the large company starts. Today, I think the largest startup in the world is supposed to be Geo. Okay, now what I'm saying is that the startup mentality can be bred into any organization, and that is the only thing that we really need to really get in. And point has been made about innovation clusters and collaborative approach. So I think the time has come where we talk move away from just competition to the co-petition, which expression has been used for quite some time. So cooperate and compete. I think that's the new world that we are going to be having, and there is no dearth of talent, as our point was already made. And there are different business model. One is to innovate technology. One is to have the business plan. But I think the business model itself can be redeveloped. Look at it and how do we go about it, and how do you communicate with the people that now we have a new set of. So today, in fact, one of the papers which we would love to circulate to some of you would be what is called regulatory entrepreneurship. So major businesses have been built, such as Uber, DraftKings, Airbnb. They have worked on the develop business model based on regulatory uncertainties, because that is what is the challenging part, and we all have been complaining about it. But it can also be leveraged to benefit the people. And I think those are some of the things we can create new business models together. So putting strategy, law, tax, and business model together, you can have much more white space that will be identified where you can have an excellent play. I think those are some of my thoughts. I do not want to go on too
Yeah.
deep, taken too much of time, and I think we can have few more questions from.
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah,
I
thank you, Nishith bhai. I think you have some
thank you.
very interesting questions. And what I'll do, I think I'm creating a bouquet of questions. A lot of questions on the regulatory scenario and government's role in supporting the R&D. And there is a specific mention in one question of Mr. Ranjit Sahani, who talked about regulator becoming facilitator and the jumpstart policies. I will ask you this question, Ranjit, that overall the questions are that what changes are required if at all a regulator has to become facilitator? What important changes are required for promoting innovations? What are the government initiatives that government can take to promote R&D in India? In fact, these are questions from one of the eminent lawyers from US. Uh, so, what are the role government can play and how regulations can change? Maybe 2 3 minutes on that.
Well, I'll be short on that. The thing is, just by the pen, the government can make changes which will encourage innovation. You take something as simple as data protection. Now, when people do research and they want to patent their product, process, or whatever it is, you need to protect your data. Now, India is one of the very few remaining countries, probably the last, I suppose, which does not have a data protection. Now, this has been discussed now for more than 15 years, ever since the product patent law came into place. And yet today, there's no sign at all that this is going anywhere. So what is the signal you're giving to innovators that when you do your research, your data will not be protected? We have data protection in agrochemical industry, we have data protection in the IT industry, but pharmaceuticals, where the core is innovation, you do not have data protection. So a simple stroke of the pen can make these differences, and that is very important.
Yeah. So, Shailesh, would you add something?
Yeah, only couple of points. We have multiple approval system in our regulatory, which makes life so difficult for people to go and get clearances. Especially example is in biotechnology. It is very important to get our act together and keep one single body which has got the approval ability. Number two, we take a long time to get a particular application, new drug application approved. It takes months and sometimes years. I think China has done enormous amount of work in reducing that time lag. And also there is fast track approval for truly innovative medicines that are coming out. I think if we can bring some of these 3 or 4 elements, and what Ranjit already mentioned, that we give the kind of protection that is needed for innovator to invest, plus some fiscal benefits that we need to provide for innovators for risk bearing capacity. I think there are models available, Milind, and I think we can truly very quickly move on to that ecosystem which will help us to drive innovation.
Yeah. So,
In the
Sharad,
past,
yeah,
Milind, just one point I want to make. In the
sure.
past, our regulators have been very creative. They said this was a single window clearance, but behind that window, there were multiple windows to open as well. So what
Agreed.
Shailesh mentioned, it should be truly a speedy clearance, and we have to take the best practices across the world. We cannot go across 15 countries and get the worst construct out of that. We should really ahead. We have to make a jump start. We have a catch-up game to play here.
Yeah. So I think another questions are on R&D side. So Sharad and Vaidheesh, I would ask you, Sharad first, that is there any availability of capital in India or government support for R&D? Unless that comes, would innovation happen or not? So Sharad, you first, and then Vaidheesh can add.
So, Milind, most of pharma in India is not dependent on government support for even the current operations. So I think the funding from government concept is not really there, and I don't think we have heard or seen of any such plans or programs. But doesn't mean that we cannot come up with ideas of public-private partnerships in the areas of innovation funding, if that is the need of the hour. In other parts of the world, you do see some of these concepts for, especially for rare diseases, where the innovation is dependent on a large amount of funding, but the number of patients, so to say, is not high. But I'm not aware that in India such a ecosystem exists for the government looking at funding into innovation.
Yeah. Vaidheesh, your take on this?
Yeah. So, Milind, I think everybody has said a wonderful points. The only point that I would like to, this is a more provocatively, I'm going to leave my thought. See, first and foremost, I think somewhere down the line, we are expecting too much from government. We think that government is there to solve your problem. I'm not even sure when it comes down to R&D, when it comes down to coming up with new laws, have we captured the imagination of our policymakers? As an example, I would say I was quite fascinated by Nishith Desai and you are all coming up with a new legislation for robots and the kind of stuff that you people do, right? Which catches the imagination of a policymaker. Now, I'm not sure whether we are all going and creating an awareness to the new trends and discontinuities that are happening in the pharma industry. I would say that there is an opportunity for us to, I'm not talking about educating, I'm talking about exciting our regulators and the government people as to what is it that you want to do in India and going and seeking whatever support is required, right? I don't think we have done enough in this front. As an example, I'll tell you for some, I should be saying, Hawkeye reason, I don't know who promoted this concept of medical devices, greenfield industry and brownfield industry, right? Now the government has gone and opened it for you, right? Now, government said, okay, you guys have got a huge innovation opportunity. Guess what? Not even a one innovation has happened in the medical device industry. Who's to be blamed, right? We go and bark on a wrong side of the policy and expect government to do something. So I somehow believe that we as an industry has a big role to play and capture the imagination of our policymakers and regulators, and with an exciting programs and offerings, and demand and push using certain innovative ideas like what you guys do in Nishith, right? So it's your call to help us help the industry to come up with an innovative way of exciting the policymakers.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I'll just sum up with two, three questions combined into one. A lot of questions on China, and a lot of people have asked question that there is some kind of reservations, aversions, or dislike for China, and a lot of countries are looking at getting out of China. Would they really come to India? Anybody can answer this question. Shailesh, let me
Yes.
ask you.
Yeah, I think the question is absolutely right. I have recently had discussions with Japanese companies. There is a Japanese company, I won't name it right now, but the company is looking at shifting their sourcing of APIs from China to India. And they are saying that we are extremely keen to do this because we really don't want to continue our long-standing relationship. We want to now move to India. Now, remember, Japanese are very, very finicky about when they change their sourcing, and they are willing to do that. Same thing I'm hearing from South Korea. South Korea is also a big supplier, but people are saying we would like to create India as a base. So yes, there is a definite thought process going on. This is I don't know how long this will remain, but I think fact remains that India, being a more reliable inverted commas country, which does not completely dominate your entire supply chain, is a easier country to deal with. So I think that's the opportunity that we must try and encash.
Thank you
If I
very
can make
much.
a point.
Nishit bhai, just 1 minute.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
7:19.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I think a very quick point I'm making. My conversation in the US and elsewhere is that people are ready to move from China to other jurisdiction, but almost 50% of the mobility would move to US. That's what was indicated to me. And so we have remaining 50% opportunity, of which significant opportunity may be captured by countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, etc. Because the regulatory system, as Ranjit mentioned, is more of regulation than facilitator. And I think if we move, we have very small window. Japanese want to come to India, no doubt about it. But are we able to capture that opportunity? Let us move very fast. Then we have definitely an opportunity in front of us. But if we do not have that assurance, or at least some kind of an idea that next 3 years or 4 years is going to take, then I would think that the interim step would be to move Chinese facility, go to Vietnam, Cambodia, wherever, together with Indian company, and then in the meanwhile, when the system improves, then you move those things to India. So there is an intermediate strategy that one can look at, and perhaps that is one thing we can, discuss the pros and cons and other kind of stuff. I think we have this discussion coming up next week or week after
Okay.
next, and we'll be delighted to have all of you present for that as well. So, what are the new ways to work around this time issue that India is confronting at this point in time? Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Nishith. I think we have few questions left, but we will try to cover, address, and send you offline one-on-one answers. I had thought of concluding or giving a kind of a snapshot or a summary of what everybody said, but I think I cannot do that. I'm slightly overwhelmed and just can't do anything. I just would like to end with only 4 words. Wish Indian Pharma had Control Alt Delete to reboot. And last message is Shubham Karoti, Shubham Bhavati.